Hello, welcome to my presentation. My name is Mojca and today I will present an article that is based on my master's thesis. It was made in collaboration with my two mentors, Helena Gabrijelčič Tomc and Saška Roškar. I hope you enjoy my presentation and without further ado, let's begin. As I said before, this is a presentation of an article, and with all good articles comes a long title, and that is Evaluation of the Impact of an Awareness-Based Animation on Students' Knowledge about Mental Illness. In this presentation, I will tell you what is the topic of the animation, why we decided on animation and students as our target audience, how we evaluated the impact of it on students' knowledge about mental illness, and of course, the results of the evaluation. So I will begin with a quick explanation on what stigma is. The word stigma has been used to denote physical signs that have been cut or burned into the body of a person, labeled as a slave, criminal, or traitor. Now today we understand stigma as a social psychological construct that refers to stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. Stereotypes are seemingly well-founded facts that correctly or incorrectly generalize social phenomena, social groups, and their members. Stereotypes then develop into prejudice when people have negative feelings towards stereotyped people and evaluate them negatively. While prejudice is the emotional reaction of an individual to the object of stigmatization, discrimination refers to a behavioral response. Now, why is it so important to fight stigma? Because due to stigma, people with mental disorders do not seek help in time, or they do not seek it at all. Animation is an exceptionally good medium for educating and raising awareness of the issues that are more difficult to talk about, such as mental illness. We actually remember more information if we watch a video or animation. In fact, our ability to remember a message is 58% higher than in case of only listening to a message. Also, our intended audiences are more likely to receive the message, and they receive it faster because the animated message is usually accessible on many different devices. In a systematic review of student-centered anti-stigma programs, Yamaguchi found that video and face-to-face contact are the most effective means of intervention to change attitudes and reduce social distance. Research shows that there is a link between the symptoms of mental illness and adolescence. The first symptoms of mental illness plaguing adults develop by the mid-20s. In individuals with mood disorders, 25% develop the disorder by the age of 18. Anxiety disorders develop by 75% by the age of 21, and 75% of people with a mental disorder develop it by the age of 24. Studies show that undergraduate students often have mental health problems, but most often they do not seek help. Based on the results of a study by Collier, which examined the personal and perceived depression stigma in Australian adolescents, it would be useful to develop a general campaign to reduce the stigma of youth and a specific campaign to reduce the stigma of young men who have little experience and knowledge of depressive disorders. In a study on positive mental health and mental health stigma among students, the participants recognized the benefits of seeking help. By being aware of the perceived benefits and highlighting them is the way to remove barriers on the way to seeking treatment for mental health problems. The study found that most students believe that stigma is an obstacle to treatment. They also believe that the search for help needs to increase, which can be achieved by reducing stigma through education and understanding. A few participants pointed out that media coverage of mental health influences society's perception of what it means to have mental health problems. Education and awareness were identified as key factors in reducing stigma and increasing treatment rates. Despite various anti-stigma activities, people are still reluctant to directly approach individuals suffering from mental illness, partly because they do not have enough knowledge on the subject. Therefore, the aim of our study was to test whether animation can improve the knowledge about appropriate or inappropriate conversations with a person suffering from depression in a Slovenian student population. We focused on education and awareness-based animation. That was of course adapted to the target group, to evoke empathy without arousing pity and to indirectly encourage people in need and others to talk about it. We hypothesized that after watching the animation, with the goal of teaching about appropriate and inappropriate communication with a person that suffers from depression, the percentage of sentences that the respondents of the questionnaire would label as suitable for use in communication with a person that suffers from depression would change. The methodology included the identification of the target group, animation production, the testing of the participants that were target group representatives, and the statistical analysis of the results. The target group were students of the first and second level of higher and university educational study program of the University of Ljubljana. Now, study programs were from different professional fields. Animation production included pre-production of animation, where we determined the message of the animation, wrote the script, and created a story. It was a narrative in the form of a personal confession of the student who suffers from depression. The second part was production and post-production of animation. For digital illustration, we used Graphics Tablet and Adobe Photoshop. We captured the sound and narration with a microphone and Audacity program. For animation, we used Adobe After Effects, and final editing was done in Adobe Premiere Pro. The survey was conducted using the Google Forms tool. It was anonymous and was sent by email. The online survey was divided into 3 parts. In the first part, the participants filled in demographic data, answered a question whether they had personal experiences with a mental disorder, and completed a questionnaire consisting of 22 phrases, of which 11 were suitable and 11 were unsuitable for use in communication with a person suffering from depression. In the second part, they watched the animation, and in the third part, they answered a questionnaire consisting of the same 22 phrases as in the first part of the survey, but the distribution of the phrases was different this time. So they had to choose again the phrases that they thought were appropriate to use in communication with a person that suffers from depression. Examples of inappropriate phrases were, "You do not look depressed to me," "Try to get more exercise and eat a healthy diet," "Get yourself together, be grateful for what you have," "Ah, you do not have to be depressed about anything, you've got it all." And examples of appropriate phrases, "I'm worried about you. Is there anything I can do to help you? Whenever you want to share something with me, I'm here for you. I'm interested in everything you want to tell me. I'm here for you even in difficult times. I'm not going anywhere. I want to help you. You are not alone." Each sentence was rated by the participants on a 5-point Likert scale and marked as appropriate or inappropriate. The statistical analysis of the results was performed in IBM SPSS statistics. We were interested in whether the percentage of responses indicated inappropriate communication with a person suffering from depression changes after watching the animation. The mutual comparison of the average values of the selected parameters was performed with a paired sample t-test for repeated measurements. We used it to evaluate the survey responses in 22 sentences before and after watching the animation. The value of statistical significance was defined at p equals 0.05 with a confidence interval of 95%. The change in attitude to a more or less appropriate phrase was characterized by a positive or negative difference calculated between the responses resulted before and after watching the animation. If defined statistical conditions were met, it could be argued that the person's attitude has changed, which meant that there had been a relevant change in knowledge about a topic. The relevant change has been confirmed when the response was statistically significant. In the respondent's attitude, there was a change to more appropriate or less stigmatizing phrase used to address a person with depression. Here are the scenes from the animation, which depicts the personal experience of a student with depression and the support she receives from her environment. The main message is that the depression is a curable disease, so the animation urges people to support people, not stigmatize them. The total number of respondents who filled out the entire survey was 251. Their age was between 19 and 30 years old. All questions in the survey were mandatory, so that participants could only submit a fully completed survey. Significantly more women than men took part in the survey, namely 280 women and 33 men. The completion of the survey depended on people's willingness to participate and interest in the topic, as the survey was conducted online and was not mandatory. The link to the survey was distributed by email from various faculties and their social networks, so we could not predict how many women or men the survey would be forwarded to. Women suffer from depression twice as often as men, therefore it is possible that they were more attracted to the topic and as a result participated in the survey more than men. There were several possible answers to the question, do you have any experience with a mental disorder? 269 answers were recorded, indicating that the participants had a personal experience with a mental disorder or knew someone who had an experience with a mental disorder. The participants ticked 86 times that they had no experience with a mental disorder or did not want to say that they had. The analyzed data of the selection of 22 appropriate and inappropriate phrases are presented in this table as mean values and standard errors. The mutual comparison of the mean values of the selected parameters, the degree of suitability of the phrase, was performed with a paired sample t-test for repeated measurements. As said before, we used it to evaluate the survey responses in 22 sentences before and after watching the animation. Table 1 contains descriptive statistics. The mean values of the answers of all sentences before and after watching the animation and the standard deviation are calculated. The letter B indicates the answers before watching the animation and the letter A indicates the answers after watching the animation. The second table shows the t-test values for repeated measurements, comparison of mean values before and after the animation, and the corresponding characteristic levels. As shown in Table 2, statistically significant differences occurred in 18 sentences out of 22. If we convert this into percentages, we can conclude that the watching of the animation resulted in an 81.8% change in students' thinking. The results obtained from the survey indicate that the participants were able to correctly assess the appropriateness or inappropriateness of the sentences before watching the animation. Most of the participants had a personal experience with a mental disorder or know someone who had an experience with a mental disorder. According to the results, the animation further strengthened the participants' knowledge and convinced them of the appropriateness or inappropriateness of the sentences. This is indicated by lower averages of responses after watching the animation in sentences 1 to 11 and higher averages of responses after watching the animation in sentences 12 to 22. The results after watching the animation were even closer to grade 1, completely inappropriate, which is the desired result in sentences 1 to 11, or closer to grade 5, completely appropriate, which is the desired result in sentences 12 to 22. These results mean that the participants have understood the message of the animation, and the message of the illustrations and the animation in conjunction with the color scheme and the narrative was appropriate to convey the message and to raise awareness of the depression. In conclusion, mental disorders are diseases such as diabetes or various forms of cancer, but mental illnesses are much more stigmatized. One of the consequences of stigma is that it is difficult to seek help. Students often have mental health problems, but usually they do not seek help. Campaigns that use the principles of social marketing are therefore important to combat the stigma of mental health problems, and they can use print and digital media, including animation, to present a variety of topics. Our aim was to use animation to introduce students to depression from the student's perspective, to teach them about appropriate and inappropriate communication that can be used in a conversation with a person with depression, and to demonstrate the importance of appropriate support. We confirmed the hypothesis that animation is statistically relevant in changing students' beliefs about the appropriateness or inappropriateness of communication that can be used in a conversation with a person that suffers from depression towards less stigma. By confirming the hypothesis, we proved the effectiveness of animation as an awareness-raising and educational material for presenting more difficult issues in anti-stigma campaigns. In our case, the animation plays a small part in a fight against mental health stigma, but it has an effect on people nonetheless. Thank you very much for listening. I hope it inspired you in any way or that it encouraged you to talk more to people that are around you. Have a nice day and stay just a minute or two longer so you can see the final animation used in this research. Thank you.
Še en dan, ko ne čutim ničesar. Kako sem prišla do sem? Nevidna sila mi obteži telo, priklene me na posteljo. Konstantna borba me utruja. Ljudje ne razumejo moje stiske. Njihovi odzivi me spravljajo v obup.
Zakaj si tako resna?
Mal se nasmej, no.
Razmišljaj bolj pozitivno.
No, pa ne bi tako žalostna.
Ni tako hudo.
Včasih pomaga več gibanja.
Vse je v tvoji glavi.
Vedno manj imam energije za pretvarjanje. Umikam se stran od ljudi. Moje družabno življenje izginja. Trudim se dokončati faks, da ne bom samo breme staršem. Vem, da sem breme. Drugim kvarim življenje s svojimi problemi. Počutim se tako nemočno. Kako naj se spravim k sebi, če vsakim dnem tonem globje in globje?
Zadnje čase se mi zdiš potrta, a si v redu. Skrbi me zate.
Kadarkoli bo želela kaj deliti z mano, bom poslušal. Zanima me vse, kar mi želiš povedati. Tukaj sem zate. Ne grem nikamor.
Mislim, da bi bilo dobro, da poiščeš strokovno pomoč. Pri tem ti lahko pomagam.